Do you guys remember a couple months ago when I talked about Dan versus? Well, I mean, you could be new and not know that I did that, so here you go, here it is. In short, Dan versus was really something special. It was an edgy animated sitcom with a nasty main character who we want to see win in the end. I honestly can't think of another show that did what Dan versus did, especially not on The Hub. Yeah, for those who don't remember, The Hub was the home to, this show. Not only that, but the show found itself surrounded by other Hasbro properties like Family Game Night, Care Bears, Pound Puppies, and Strawberry Shortcake. Dan versus was the only outlier here, and I think that that's what made it special. In a seemingly never-ending sea of fun for the whole family Hasbro products, we had Dan versus. That's what really made it shine. However, contrary to popular belief, it was not all smooth sailing for our jerky protagonist and his childlike friend. No, if it was, they wouldn't be here. Welcome to Versus the Network 101, what happens when the network just stops caring. Even before Dan versus got to the Hub, their network problems were already pretty high. The creators, who are named Chris Pearson and Dan Mandel, yes, the characters were named after the creators, but we can't dwell on that, so let's move forward. They kept pitching this around from network to network to network, and they all said no. Even Adult Swim, who is known for taking extreme risks on things like, say, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, or Super Jail, said no to Dan versus. However, their diligence paid off because, as luck would have it, Cartoon Network had this giant executive shakeup, and the new executives actually wanted Dan versus. Not for Adult Swim, but for Cartoon Network, which was okay, until it wasn't. They were trying to convince the creators to do things like age Dan down to make him more relatable with the kids, but of course that didn't really fly. Chris Pearson described the show's production at Cartoon Network as development hell, and luckily, they ended up getting out of there just in time. Thanks to them not signing over the show officially, they were able to keep the rights. And this was right around the time when CN Reels started showing up. Oh boy. That means if Dan versus did go on Cartoon Network as planned, it would have lasted maybe one season, and then would have been replaced by Survive This or The Other Siders. I don't want to live in that alternate timeline, I'm good here. They ended up getting picked up by this brand new network called The Hub, and they were the only ones there that were not a Hasbro property. Keep that in mind, that's gonna play in big later on. Once again, according to Chris Pearson, you're gonna be hearing that a few more times throughout the video, the network was surprisingly supportive of their show. Yeah, they were trying to get away with a lot of nasty stuff, the likes of which, say, Pound Puppies would never even attempt, but they were okay with that. There were a few rocky moments and times where they butted heads, but nothing too out of the ordinary. The two biggest examples I can think of are when the network told them to change the ending of Family Cruise to make it less, conclusive, I guess, and changing around the airing order, which surprisingly happens a whole lot. Baby Blues, Dave the Barbarian, and even SpongeBob SquarePants all have this happen. It's nothing unique, and it's nothing super damaging, but it is a little bit irksome because the creators clearly had a specific order in mind, which, for the record, was this. But on the whole, nothing too terrible happened to Dan. Until the end of Season 3, that is. The network decided to do Dan dirty. What did they do? They left it to rot, having it be stuck in eternal limbo. Not officially canceling it, but basically forcing everyone to get tired of asking when's the next episode, when are we going to be back in production, and move on with their lives. This is the network equivalent of ghosting someone on Tinder. You start up a conversation, things seem to be going okay, but then out of the blue, they're gone, never to be heard from again. Dan versus met the exact same fate, and I think Curtis Armstrong, the actor who played Dan, describes it perfectly with his Facebook post that I will read for you right here. Christian Paredes, James Jones, and Larry Reaper, among others, have been kind enough to ask about Dan versus, the animated series that I've been doing for the last few seasons on the Hub. It was created by Chris Pearson and Dan Mandel, and also starred Dave Foley and Paget Brewster, giving truly funny performances as Dan's best friend and wife respectively. Dan versus actually won an Emmy this year for direction from Dan Unnell, or could be Angel depending on how you pronounce it, and was among my favorite pastimes. It has been cancelled for the baffling and inexplicable reasons that shows like Dan versus get cancelled. I can't really explain it because it's never been explained to me. Occasionally, I would ask about the status of the show and be told it wasn't cancelled. But when I would ask about specifics, there would be long, awkward pauses and then changes to other subjects, like the weather, or the possibility of a government shutdown. This was the previous government shutdown, which gives you an idea how long this has been going on. Finally, I had to just give up and move on with my life. This is actually not uncommon in my business. Things just sort of fade away with a noticeable absence of closure. You can't help dwelling on it for a time, but eventually, the whole thing just becomes sort of a fragrant memory. Some fragrances, of course, are sweeter than others. I'm happy to say that in the case of Dan Versus, they are, pretty much across the board, sweet. I loved everyone I worked with. The company was great, the network was supportive, and, of course, the fans were rabid and vocal in their enthusiasm. The checks cleared, it's out on DVD, and it was fun, and you can't really ask for more than that. As you can tell from here, the network basically gave up on the show and pretended that it didn't. No way, Dan Versus is still going on, but we're not gonna tell you when it's coming back or what's happening behind the scenes, so how about that President Obama, huh? I will disagree with one thing that Curtis Armstrong had in his post. There is one more thing you could ask for. Actual closure. It's not that hard. In a business that's as cold and calculating as show business, things do not happen spur of the moment out of the blue. There had to have been a motive, there had to have been a reason. And I have two theories as to what happened. My first theory is that this has something to do with the Discovery Family rebrand. For those who don't know, the hub ended up becoming Discovery Family. There you go, you're caught up to speed. In all seriousness, what actually happened was that sometime around 2013, Hasbro decided it didn't really want to do business with the hub anymore, at least not as much. So the Discovery Channel swooped in, bought a whole bunch of Hasbro stock, and then became majority owner in the network and rebranded it to Discovery Family. Now, Dan Versus was cancelled before this ever happened. That would lead some to think that these two are unrelated. However, these kinds of buyouts and mergers don't happen overnight. They also don't happen in the span of a month or two either. There are contract negotiations, terms and conditions, plans being worked out for what they want to do with their new acquisition. These things take a long, long time, and especially before they ever get announced to the public. When they finally make the announcement, they have a pretty solid foundation of what exactly is going on. It's possible that the Discovery Channel thought that Dan Versus didn't really fit its demographic. It's possible, but in my opinion, not super likely. Mostly because I have more stock in my second theory. This has something to do with Hasbro. Remember when I said that Dan Versus was basically the only hub show that wasn't in some way owned or funded by Hasbro? Yeah, to me, it seems like that's what did it in the end. Hasbro was not only a partner with the hub, they owned a sizable amount of stock, meaning that they were part owner. That's why you saw all of these shows based off of their intellectual properties, especially the ones that were having toy lines coming out. Dan Versus did not fit that. Therefore, Dan Versus wouldn't exactly be favored by the network, and definitely not by Hasbro. It could have been that the hub was starting to lose ratings and revenue, so they had to start cutting costs and cutting corners, and one of those had to be Dan Versus. If they removed a Hasbro show, Hasbro would have gotten upset and then could have packed up and left, taking their money with them. Or it could have been that Hasbro had a new idea for a show and the hub didn't have a time slot, so one of these shows had to go. Why not make it the only one that was not in any way tied to its corporate overlord? You see where I'm getting at here, right? Now, none of these are strictly confirmed. Like I said, they're all theories. Even Chris Pearson himself doesn't really know what happened. That's just what happens when the network does this to you. You don't even know that you're really canceled. You could be on an extended hiatus that lasts until the next decade, but you'll never stick around long enough to find out. You need a job. You need to provide for yourself or your family. Time to pack up and move on. That's what the crews of these shows have to do. Just like Dave the Barbarian, my favorite show of all time. That too was put in limbo and everyone had to give up and move on. It sucks for everyone involved, the fans, the crew, everyone. And the part that stings most is that you never find out why. At least when shows get outright canceled, they tend to know what happened. Maybe they got bad ratings, maybe they got poor reviews, maybe they were too expensive, maybe they couldn't launch a toy line. But with this, nothing. It's like punishing a child but not telling them what they did wrong. All they see is that they got hurt. But is there any hope for the future of Dan Versus, if it has a future at all? Well, actually there is. Apparently, from what I'm hearing, Dan Versus is getting shopped around to a bunch of streaming services like HBO Max in order to get a revival. This is because the hub never officially owned the rights to Dan Versus. That was the producer Dan Onel/Angel. That means they're free to do with it as they see fit, providing of course they get the adequate funding. And hopefully they do. We gotta let the people know that we want to see more Dan Versus. I am very against show revivals because more often than not they turn out to be, this. But for Dan Versus, I'm willing to make an exception because Dan Versus was cut down in its prime and they still have all the ideas that they had from back then. They weren't done yet, they had a lot more stories to tell. And I said this in the previous video, Dan Versus is one of those shows that has such a loose premise that you could basically go on forever. And if the revival does get picked up, we can see Dan go up against things like Liechtenstein, Spas, Flag Day, The Childhood Bully, Itchy Underwear, Mondo Owada, and the Southern Hemisphere. I don't think that they're gonna do those last couple though, but, you know, it's possible. I bet you're all wondering how I even know that this is happening. Well, for one, I'm part of the effort to get it back up and running. Not too long ago, the Dan Versus fandom got in contact with none other than Chris Pearson himself. Chris and the de facto leader of the fanbase ended up coming up with a plan to get Dan Versus revived. During the pitch, Chris has to make it absolutely clear that there's still a market for Dan Versus. And that's where folks like me come in. A bunch of YouTubers who were clearly fans of Dan Versus were contacted, myself included, and were asked to join this grand plan to publish Dan Versus related videos all around the time that this supposed reboot is gonna be pitched. I'll be honest, like I said, normally I'm not really big on cartoon revivals, but I'm also not a big fan of people trying to get them revived. Let's face it, change.org petitions aren't really gonna change anyone's minds. But when I heard that the big man himself was a part of this, I couldn't say no. And you know what? I implore you guys to not say no either. Doesn't matter if you guys are YouTube reviewers or whatever, you can still get involved. Start sharing the hashtag DanVersusRevival, or go onto the Dan Versus message boards that I've linked in the description and get involved in the community. I mean, why not? Chris himself is there, you can ask him a lot of questions. Just don't pester him, please. No one likes that. But is there a lesson to be learned from what happened to Dan Versus? Absolutely, although it's a little bit hard to apply. The network's the entity that decides whether your show lives or dies. It can snap its fingers and at a moment's notice, you could be packing up and heading off to Nickelodeon where shows and dreams go to die. So you won't really be able to decide whether your show gets to avoid the cancellation, but you can press the network for why it happened. You have a right to know. Was it something you did? Was it something that the show did? Was it something that happened with the viewership? Something. There had to have been a reason. And learning this reason can help you when you pitch a news show or when you help someone else work on their project. Knowledge is power after all. So if you ever pitch a show and get it picked up, beware. With no notice whatsoever, you too could have your show be ghosted by the network. Well folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you think? What do you think of the situation that Dan Versus got itself into? And would you like to see Dan Versus come back? Comment below and let me know because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Now, I hope you're ready for more Versus the Network because as the videos go on, the treatment gets worse and worse and worse. Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get rocky and crazy. And you can only find out how by watching the next 3 videos coming in the next 3 weeks. Wow, shocker.